my early years, I remember having quite a privileged life, but my parents were constantly fighting. So I was living in a house that was full of domestic violence, and being in the next bedroom, listening to my dad beat my mum constantly. I realise now, but at the time you don't realise what damage it's doing to someone so young. And I think the earliest I can remember this is like 8, 9 years old. Anyway, as soon as my teenage years come, I started running away. And I just wanted to get out of the house, I think. I just wanted to escape. And listening to that constantly in my younger years, when I look at my life now and what I went through, it really did, I think, determine my future. And so from the ages of 13, I'd started smoking drugs, hanging around with boys. I was also getting bullied at school. I think because I was from a privileged background, my grandparents had racehorses. I was always at their house, and I was quite spoilt. But it didn't make up for what I was going through mentally at home. So it was like I was very, very, very bullied at school for just wearing something nice. So I learnt quickly how to learn how to defend myself. I always seemed to be running away, and I ran away all my life. So the running away carried on, the crime started. By the age of 14, I'd been arrested for 36 burglaries. I was the only girl in a group of boys. So you can see how it was going. And I got a probation for this, and my probation officer used to touch me up, cop a feel, and give me a fiver. So I learned then that if I just let him have a grope, I could get a bit of money, buy some drugs. So it was all escape. That's all it ever was, escape. And by the age of 16, I was pregnant, baby, and a boyfriend that was beating me up. So I'd done exactly what I'd grown used to, I'd done. So anyway, after 3 years of him beating me up, I got into a battered wives' home in Oxford. All that did was educate me that I could get away and I could run even further if I needed to. And in this instance, I could escape all my debts, escape probation, escape everything, and start again. And that's what I've done now all my life until 6 years ago. I landed in a city not far from London, and got myself involved in with a new boyfriend, who later went on to start beating me up. So it was another violent relationship. So it's like what you know when you're growing up, that's what you will know when you're older. It's like that's what I thought that's what love was, and I couldn't understand any other way. So I had 2 children of this man who constantly beat me. But while this was going on, my crime wave still never stop. I'd started to sell drugs by now. So I was selling hashish from small amounts. I went on to kilos. So I was making quite a lot of money. Until one day that this children's father of mine decided that he was going to give me a kick-in on my birthday because I had a new leather jacket that my mum had bought me. So he woke me up in the middle of the night, actually. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. He came in and started punching me. I ran into the street, and a man across the road opened his door where I ran in. It was like, it was pretty bad. He chased me with a carving knife as I ran out into the street. It's just like, how could someone feel that much anger towards someone they're meant to love? But anyway, that was it. That was the last time. I never went out with him again, and I never went out with any other man that beat me again. Anyway, from that, because I was selling drugs and I'd got rid of him, I was like, thought I was Billy Big Spuds now. Started going out with a new geezer that was already selling, so we put our money in, started buying even more. We went on a trip to London one day to buy a couple of kilos, and we'd all put our money in, and on our way there, I started to get doubts of who is this people we're meeting, and I didn't like the sound of it. By the time we'd got to Camberwell in London, very rough area about 25 years ago. I decided that I'd take my money out, you know, having my money. So I took my money out, and we was arguing in the car. Anyway, he went off. Him and his friend went off to buy the drugs. And the girl that was driving was just this little young girl on crack. She was about 18. Daddy had bought her a new Renault Turbo. And she didn't have a clue. And I was telling her, move the car. And she just wouldn't move the car. And I ended up screaming at her to move the car because this was just taking long and long and long. And I just didn't know where we was and what was going on. And eventually when she did move the car up the road, I could see down the road that my boyfriend was staggering, running up the road. So we dragged them in the car. And I was later to find out that he had 7 holes in him, stab wounds. And he'd been ammoniaed in his eyes. And he'd had his dreadlocks cut off. And the other guy had had his throat cut. So I had to get us back down the motorway, bleeding all over me. And I had to dump one at one end of the road and one at the other and get myself home. I didn't know whether they were going to die, but that's the life I lived. It was crime. I didn't trust the police, and that's how I'd learnt to live my life. So that went on. After that, because of the money I'd left, a friend of mine owned saunas all over the country, so I began to know a bit about that. And so I thought, right, I'm going to open a brothel. So I decided to open a brothel. I was one of the first ones in this city, and this was 25 years ago. I think now they've got like 100, and they've got a beat as well. So I probably ruined that city, but it kind of went in hand because when I started owning brothels and running prostitutes, I was now on cocaine and smoking crack. So I'd gone up a league really, but down a league because there was nowhere else to go. Crack became my life. My children, they now had au pairs. I never used to go home. I would send them pizzas in taxis with money shoved in pizza boxes. And I lived in hotels. I used to, all the money I ever made, I spent on cocaine. But being on crack out my head every day, and by this stage I was like crawling around the floor, picking up anything I could find on the floor to smoke, and be staring out windows constantly for like 12 hours, burning holes in curtains, you could play dot to dot on the curtains. Where I'd be standing there waiting for drug dealers and thinking the police were coming to get me. And it was just mad. And I used to pay, £300 a day to get like that in that state. But anyway, that was it. I had to get out. And I ended up doing another runner with the kids, leaving my council house behind and everything. So I'd landed in London now with 3 children. Got myself into a crack rehab, one of the first ones in England. It was like... Well, it was 6 months of hell, really, because when I came out that rehab, I was now on a glass pipe and a Bunsen burner. So I'd gone up a league. I thought I'd seen it all, but I hadn't been in London before. So I was now selling crack in Charing Cross on the streets of London with people jacking up in alleyways in front of me. And I thought, I just couldn't believe where I'd got myself. I was even selling... delivering guns and bullets from Harlesden, and I just couldn't believe I just couldn't believe it. I think if I hadn't been on crack, I wouldn't have survived it. So I didn't realise that, you know, how bad it was. While you're taking crack, that's all you think about. Drugs, 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 nothing else but drugs, drugs, drugs. And you pay so much money to get in that horrific state. And that's what I did, day in, day out. That went on and on and on. Anyway, in the meantime, I'd got hold of this geezer, this rich guy, and I got him to give me 15 grand. And I opened a new brothel. I opened a shop, and that shop went on for 9 years. But within a year of me getting that shop, and still I'd cut the crack out, but I was now sniffing cocaine constantly all day long. I found out I had cancer. And my cancer was that bad that they thought that was it. Anyway, I got rushed in, operated on. They took out all my right side, my kidney, adrenal glands, lymph nodes, the whole lot, and told me that I had to have scans every 3 months because it was quite a serious cancer. So that went on. That didn't stop me though. Within weeks of coming out of hospital, I was back on cocaine. And then 3 years, I think it was, 3 years later, when I decided that I'd sell a kilo of cocaine to somebody. And cut a long story short, I was kidnapped outside my shop. I was taken off by 2 black men where I was pistol whipped in the head and I'm dumped in a side road. And I'd wet myself in the fear, with the fear. And I couldn't leave it. I couldn't run. I had 2 yardies sat in my shop that was full of prostitutes. And I'd just lost £26,000 of their money. And what could I do? There was nothing I could do. I had to go back there. Within 9 months of that happening, I lost my business. I couldn't cope no more with it. I'd never worked before as a prostitute. I'd always sold girls. But because that happened in my shop, I now had to work. I had to sell myself. And I was like 40 years old. And I think now when I look back, I was just in shock. I was in total shock. When I was kidnapped, my cancer had spread to my lung. I just had my lung out, and it was 6 weeks before I was pistol whipped and kidnapped. So being told I had lung cancer as well, being kidnapped by Yardies, being a drug addict for like 30 years of my life, I didn't know what day of the week it was. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know no one. I didn't speak to my mum and dad for 20 years. And when after about 9 months after being kidnapped, I just had a breakdown. I had a mental breakdown. And I gave everything up. But what I was frightened of is that I still owed like this £4,000 to Lloyd's Bank, that there was no way of me paying it, so I sold myself. So anyway, because of this breakdown, I ended up in the medical, in the medical profession, and I got put into a drug rehab that was just for people with mental health issues, because by now I had quite a few, quite a list full. The day I got out of that rehab, my friend had told me she had to go to a church in Kensington, and that I was going to bring her to it. And I said, well, why am I going to take you to that church, really, And she said, because it's in Kensington. I don't live in London, and you live in Kensington, so you're going to take me. And so I did. And when I walked into this church, I felt I was going to burst into flames, really, I thought, a wretch like me. But I did, and I couldn't stand there with everybody jumping up and down. I couldn't handle all that. You don't have to do all that. Church isn't just for them people. Church is for everyone. And that's what I learned. It took a while to learn that, but I did. And while in that church, I found a leaflet, because I couldn't stand with that. Like, I went wandering around, and I found a leaflet for the recovery course, which I did. When I got to the recovery group, I was in a very bad way. But now I can look back and see that and understand everybody that walks in that door so well. But Jesus thing just didn't happen to me straight overnight. It really didn't. If you look back over my life, it just wasn't going to happen that way. I felt dirty. I felt wrong. I felt, how could I be forgiven? And this forgiveness was the main thing for me to deal with, because I could go to church every Sunday and every Thursday and ask for forgiveness, but I just didn't feel it was real. It wasn't happening for me. And so I started to do more things. I started to get, this is probably on the 2nd year. It's really slow for me. Some people can get it really quick, but for me, it took a lot of time, because I just couldn't get round this forgiveness. How could he forgive me? So I started to involve myself more. I'd got a thirst for knowledge now. I wanted to know more about this Jesus and who he was and why is he going to forgive me. And so I signed up for everything. I was doing the Alpha course, I did the theology course, I was there for an opening of an envelope. But if I could get involved in it, I would. And that was the main thing about it. In the first year, I just kept thinking, why doesn't no one speak to me? But that's what you've got to do. You've got to involve yourself in it, because the more you involve yourself in it, the quicker you learn. And it might sound silly, but when I was doing the Alpha course and I was trying to learn about this forgiveness, I actually went home and I Googled, how do you explain forgiveness to a child? Because I felt absolutely stupid. I felt illiterate. I didn't understand anything. I knew about crime, weights and measures, counting money. I just didn't know. I just didn't understand anything. Everything just sounded a blur, and I needed to land. And that's what I did. I Googled how to teach Jesus to a child, and it's like, it was just amazing, because I really did understand then. The penny dropped. And sorry. Yeah. So that's what I did, and I'm not ashamed to say it. And what I started to do next was to be like helper. I didn't think I was capable of that. How can I help anyone? But it was the best thing, because by helping others, it helps you understand more. And when you give, that's when you get blessed. And I know the Lord has blessed me. You know, how can I still be alive? How can I be saved, a wretch like me? I just can't, you know. He saved me so many times. And if I can't help someone by passing this on and showing what Jesus has done for me, then I wouldn't feel full. That's my journey and that's my job. I just know that he's all over me now, whereas I felt I had the devil clinging to my back and I couldn't shake him off. But I haven't now. I just glow inside. I know I do. I've got Jesus in me. He's obviously saved me for so many times. There's nowhere else I can go, and I'll never go back to that way of life again.